There seems to be some confusion about the function of a coach versus the function of a therapist or a counselor or a personal development helper. And there is a big difference between them. You know, if we talk about on a push and pull spectrum, where on push you have the teacher or the psychiatrist who's forcing somebody to take drugs in order to act as a chemical cosh. And then at the other end of the spectrum, where it's all pull, where you have the classical kind of psychodynamic counselor. And how do you feel about that? And how do you feel about feeling that way, et cetera, et cetera. So one push, the other pull. When we're talking about coaching, coaching is just this side of the pull, in my perspective. There are some people who think it's more. There are some people who treat essentially philosophical personal development exercises on a one-to-one format as coaching. That's more push in an ideology or in a worldview. And view it as a slightly different situation. In the same way, coaching, in terms of assisting another human being to improve their performance or behavior from some base or other, acting as a kind of a finder and refiner of resources, and then how those are applied. Whereas a coach deals more with questions of behavior, results, and the application of resources, a counselor or a therapist will deal more often in problems, issues, challenges, unhappiness or uncertainty, etc., etc. Coach will deal with issues and challenges, but not as the primary focus of their practice. There are too many people who found they were having trouble getting clients as a therapist who have changed their name to a coach, but still doing the same thing as therapy. That's confusing the waters and making it difficult for people to tell. The therapy function is for a different purpose than for coaching. In coaching, we're dealing with results and how they're created and how somebody performs within their game. Whereas when we're talking about therapy, we're often talking about questions of identity, relationship of the person to the world, more philosophical matters, etc., etc. It still may be serious work, still may be deep work, but the functions are different. If you confuse the matter by calling therapy coaching, it's no wonder that people will start getting strange ideas about it. Some people call themselves life coaches, and they stick in a whole range of possibilities in there. I've heard everything from basically a personal trainer for exercise to nutritional advice to somebody taking kind of classical personal development, new agey kind of exercises and thinking about how you feel about yourself in relation to the world, and all of them calling that life coaching. There's another person I know who is basically a financial advisor who now calls themselves a financial life coach. And what they're doing is looking at your financial goals in life and thinking about how you're going to overcome the challenges, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's pretty much exactly what they were doing when they were just a financial advisor or selling life insurance, but they're now calling it life coaching. There's a difference between the name things are called and what they are. So when one person calls something life coaching, it may be completely different from what somebody else calls life coaching. In the same way, people will call themselves executive coaches, and they might mean one particular thing. Executive coach meaning they work with people who are somehow involved in business and they're going to get paid rather than by an individual. They're going to be paid by the business instead. The kind of coaching that I do is with senior executives, and we're looking at issues of performance and how to improve performance. It's within the context of what's called high performance coaching, which is we work with people who are already good at what they do, who are already good at their job, who don't need to be told how to do their job, who there's no need for them to kind of correct fundamental issues with their performance because it's already good. These are questions of how do you get someone who is already good at what they do to perform even better? And this is also common in sports coaching, where you'll take somebody who's a very high performer, find out how to work with their game, how they're playing in order to improve. But differences in terms of how we interact with kinds of exercises, doesn't come from the labels. in terms of what I do with my clients, in terms of how I work with them, whether we use a particular model of change or development or not, all comes from the client in terms of what it is they want to do, what needs to happen, what kind of challenges they're having in pursuit of those. We don't make decisions about method or about procedure without looking at what it is we're trying to create first. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. If you want to paint an oil painting, you need to have canvas, oil paints, brushes, thinner, palette, etc., etc. Until you have those resources together, you have no business starting an oil painting. If all you got in the cupboard is a big piece of marble, a chisel, and a hammer, you're not going to make an oil painting with that, no matter how much you want. There's other resources that have to be put in place. You choose what tools you use on the basis of what you want to accomplish rather than what you happen to have around. This is another thing in terms of how people market themselves. So there are many different kinds of life coaching, and many of them have kind of proprietary brands and labels on them. Whereas in fact, in some of the cases, at least from the people who have come for help, they've been told, here is a procedure, and this procedure is the same thing as coaching. And if you do this procedure and do all the steps, then that's coaching. And if you don't do these steps, it's not coaching. I'm sorry, that's incorrect. What that is that's simply destroying the mind and the flexibility of a coach, and also handicapping clients. The procedure is not the same thing as the process seeking to create a kind of result. Human beings don't work in that way. We're not like baked beans that have an exact recipe and that can be, manufactured and put down the line. When you're working with human performance and with human beings, because there are so many variations and because we work differently, because we have different, different responses to things like food, to drugs, to environment, to stress, there is no one-shot procedure that will cover every person. When somebody says, I specialize in this coaching format or coaching procedure, I take a step back from those people. Because typically what they've done is they've prevented themselves from becoming skillful in the principles in order to promote some specific procedure. You don't want to do that. Coaching is not a profession per se in the same way that accountancy or law or medicine or architecture are organized as professions. Up until quite recently, people could call themselves psychologists without any particular training at all. It's not honest to do that. People have expectations around what a psychologist is, but it was still possible for people to call themselves psychologists. In the same way, when we're talking about coaches at the moment, there is no restriction on the use of the name. There's talk about it in the UK, there's talk about it in the EU about making them reserved. They're then having problems agreeing on what the training structure will be, what the standards will be, etc., because the discipline of coaching has so many different people using the word that one set of standards won't apply to everybody. So usually then what they try and do is they try and impose something like, well, let's make it just like counseling. Let's make everybody do psychodynamic counseling. And again, we have this drift where then the label gets pulled over and coaches no longer are coaches. They are simply psychodynamic counselors. The efficacy and possibility within coaching is destroyed. How do you become a life coach? There are many, many different ways. How do you become an executive coach or whatever? Many different paths. What I would suggest is that if you think you'd like to become a life coach, or you'd like to become an executive coach, or you'd like to become some form of coach, take some coaching yourself. Because there's no standard, there's no one thing that is coaching, you need to experience some of the variations and variety of what people are doing and calling coaching in order for you to know whether it's something that you really want to do or not. With the coaches and the teams that I run, one of the things that we get back as feedback quite often from clients is that they hadn't expected to get as much as they did from the sessions because they'd had coaches before and the coaches did other things with them. They didn't get the depth, the intensity, the scope, or getting as many problems solved in as short time as possible. But it's because how we work as executive coaches is different from how other people work. You need experience of the differences in order to know what's right for you. The second thing is, because there is no standard for these things, you'll get one group who say, everybody who becomes a coach has to be trained in Freudian psychology. And another one then says, you have to be trained in behaviorism. And another one says you have to be trained in this, in that, as a part of it. And again, what you require in order to work with people will be different depending on what kind of results you're looking to create. I wish I could say, just take this course and then everything will be fine with that. It doesn't work that way. And in fact, I don't recommend any particular coaching program at this moment without more information about what it is that you're seeking. This is something that you're going to need advice on. You're going to need to do some digging into. In a video like this, it's very, very difficult in a short time to talk about all the different variations and possibilities because it's too broad. It's too broad a question in order to address in a short time. Let me just reiterate that you need to do the research yourself and don't come to a conclusion too quickly because the field is too broad. It's going to take time and it's worth making decisions carefully so that you get the right thing for you. If you enjoyed that video, we've got some more resources over here. And if you click the link below, there's more. Subscribe.